Hey, good morning. It's nice to be with you again. It's exciting to have this time together, and I really appreciate your sharing a little bit of your time with us. It is Saturday morning, and it's already the 13th day of August, 2016. Seems to me like it was the end of the year about 10 minutes ago, 2015, but I think time's accelerating faster and faster, and what it's going up to, I'm not sure, but things are definitely really interesting in the outside world. And I have a lot to go over with you today, and then we'll see if you guys have some feedback and input of your own. I'd kind of like to talk about a subject a little bit different than we've gone into before, and I'm calling it self-evaluation. Because the whole point of this, I think, putting all this time and energy into keeping this show going and all the things that are around it, is that we want to improve the quality of your life. Basically, that's what it's about. So, really, we can give ideas, but it's you who are ultimately the ones who are going to do that. And in order to see what you want to improve, you have to see where you are now. And usually what happens is, we talk about programming and the mental and emotional programming that we're running all the time. Excuse me. And it's sometimes we think of that as the programming that's being put on us from the outside through the television and through the fake educational system and the fake science that's supposed to be so impressive and things like that. But the most powerful programming, and really the only one that can control you at all, is what you decide to do to program yourself. And the people at the top of the negative power structure that's running the U.S. and most of the world right now, they understand this completely. And they know that the programs that they come up with, that they put into Common Core, and all the commercials on television that tell you what drug to take, and if there's any problem in your body or your mind or you're not feeling great, it's because you're not taking the right drug. But that programming wouldn't do anything to you unless you accept it. And there's something called resonance that Tesla talked about a lot, and that's what he worked on to provide free energy before they stole all his papers and made HARP out of it, and that's kind of another story. But the resonance idea is very powerful, and it's all through nature, and you're dealing with it every minute. So what resonance is, if you have two strings like on a guitar, for example, and one of them starts vibrating, which is what makes sound from the instrument, and the other string next to it tends to start vibrating in the same frequency, either in a harmonic or the same note. And if you have a bunch of women together in the same living situation and they're tied into the energies of the earth, and they're having their period once in a while, after a certain amount of time, they all start having their period about the same time. There's all kinds of resonance. And there are kids in a class, little kids in an elementary school class. Some of them start misbehaving and doing things to disrupt the class. Pretty soon, the other ones that are receptive to that start doing the same thing, and they didn't even have the idea to do it. This is aspects of resonance. And so, if you're taught in school that 2 and 2 is 5 in various ways, and you see the other kids starting to write down 2 and 2 is 5, then there's a very strong pull, which is a resonance, for you to write down 2 and 2 is 5 and memorize it. And before thinking that would be silly, shouldn't think so fast, because we've all done that in our lives millions of times, and all of us are doing it in some way now. And so, in a way, getting to know yourself, which is an absolute prerequisite for knowing anything about where you came from, other than memorizing things about it, is a process of getting rid of those resonances that you don't want, so that you can walk through any environment and resonate with what's real inside yourself, which is where your connection to your source is. All the great spiritual teachers have said that, you know, even in the Bible it says the kingdom of God is within you. If you take it out of religious terms and put it in just where you came from, no matter what your mind believes, it's accessed internally. And that's where all the PowerPoints are to accomplish things in the outside world. And that's our chance for having a positive impact on the outside world, is whether or not we're going to access what's inside. And that's you personally, not anybody else. So no matter who's around you, the biggest disruptive force or the biggest intimidating force, or some doctor telling you you're going to die unless you have chemotherapy tomorrow, which is happening all over the country at this moment. If you're tuned into the resonance within yourself, which is where all the reality comes from, then you're not intimidated, and you're not convinced that 2 and 2 is 5 just because everybody around you in the whole world says it. It has no effect on you because of where your attention is. So, in a way, a lot of times the deepest things are the simplest. But it doesn't mean that you can understand them just by repeating them. And there are levels and levels and levels of understanding, like the proverbial onion analogy. And each layer you get to, you think, oh, now I got to the bottom of it. No, you got to like level 1 out of 10 trillion. So that, you know, there's no basis for arrogance at all when you start to realize that. You know, all of us know absolutely zero compared to what there is to know. And anytime you see yourself getting proud of what you know, you might want to kind of reorient that way, because it's basically nothing. But the other balancing side of that is that the source of absolutely everything is directly inside us, and we can access it to a greater and greater degree whenever we decide that that matters. And most of the time, what keeps us from that is we're totally focused on a program. And it's good to become aware of what program you're focused on, because there always is one. And if you peel it off, there's going to be another one. But the other one is more subtle. And the more they get, the finer and more subtle that those programs get, the more your vision is opened up. And it's not just seeing something, it's experiencing it, and you get closer to your normal state, which is a really good state. I mean, there aren't words to describe it. The normal state is so, I mean, it's just silly to put descriptive adjectives on it, because just begin that is the deal. And there are little examples of it on the physical level. And if you've ever been to a concert that made you feel spectacular during it and the music was just lifting you up completely, that's just a little tiny glimpse or hint of what your ordinary normal state is. So if you're not feeling that, and none of us are really feeling it the way that it would be uncovered, then the whole job is to see, all right, what is blocking it? You don't have to create it, because it's already there. It was there before anything physical ever existed. And it's not going away. So if you're not experiencing it, you, not anybody else, not any outside stress or difficult person or situation, the only one with enough power to block it is you. So instead of figuring out what difficult person is standing in the way, that difficult person is you. You know who that is. It's you. So in order to see, it's not because you're bad, it's just because, again, most of what I want to tell you is just ridiculous to try to put in words. But I don't know really what else to do at this point. So you have to forgive me for them not being, adequate or accurate. but maybe you can get the feel for what I'm trying to say. It's like we ask the question before, who are you? And then you think of all these identity factors that you've got with you, and these labels and groups you identify with, and a belief that you officially have, and whether you're male or female and how old you are, and maybe even as superficial as to what color skin you have in this particular lifetime and things like that. But if you rip away all that stuff, who is left? And if you've ever seen someone die, then you actually can see, even if your vision is not really developed, if you pay attention, you can see something leaving, and the eyes change. It's like the light that is animating them goes upward to the top of the eyes and then disappears. Who's that? Because that's still who you are right now, even if you're not dying at the moment. And if you become connected to that consciously, then you can use it during your lifetime, in fact, right now. So that's what self-evaluation is about. And it's mental, physical, emotional, all these different levels. And if you start on the physical level, if you want to deal with your physical health, then what you can do is start looking at your body, but look at it like you've never seen it before. And if you do that, you'll notice certain things because you've made allowances. And it's like, for example, let's say there's a bunch of fat deposited around your midsection. This is really common for both sexes, and for women it's a lot on the hips too, usually, but different parts of the body, parts of the arms. Maybe you've never seen that before, and you let yourself see it and not be threatened by seeing it. And you think, all right, that's interesting. Maybe that's not, the ideal condition of the body. And what would make that change more towards a normal state? And you start thinking of different kinds of movement or exercise, or maybe changes in things you're eating, less junk food, less sugar, stuff like that. And then you set up experiments and you change those things and you watch that part of your body and you see what happens. Those are really powerful things you can do, and they'll lead you to a different level of awareness so that you don't even think of just going in to the doctor and asking for a drug for those things, because most of it you can just change and take care of yourself. So all of this kind of self-awareness, this is the reason why people have pursued different kinds of meditation. And meditation, again, it's not because of a specific form or a mantra or a breathing pattern or a place where you're focusing your attention. It's for the result. And the result is being more clearly aware of yourself so you can be aware of your source and get consciously connected to that. And these techniques that people have come up with to do that are for that result. They're not for saying, oh yeah, I do this kind of meditation, or, this is the right kind and every other kind is, that's like, a very rudimentary level before you realize, what's going on, because you start identifying with the outer labels of things rather than remembering that it's for a result. And if you keep your mind on the result, it changes the whole outcome and the whole process. So there are different kinds of meditation, but the easiest time to do it is really when you first wake up in the morning, because all the programs have not kicked into high gear. And during the night, the body uses the time to repair. There's all kinds of cellular regeneration going on at nighttime, and most of the stresses are off. Especially if you don't eat late at night and don't end the day with either heavy food or really chaotic and negative thought patterns, watching really terrifying or distressing movies right before going to bed is probably not very helpful. But normally at night, you have all this time when it's used for regeneration. And so when you first wake up in the morning, before you even open your eyes, you have a big advantage of being relatively calm and not disturbed by a lot of chaotic things going on. So if you can stay wide awake, you can do this lying down. And if not, then you can do it sitting, which is normally what I do. I know a lot of men especially tend to fall asleep when they lie down, more than women as a general rule, but there's exceptions on both sides. And you don't want to fall asleep because you can't do this practice if you're asleep. So you can either, what you want to do is give yourself something to focus on other than all of the distraction of the outside world during the day. So some people use their breath and they just very carefully watch the breath going in and out. And the reason they do that is because if you're watching it with all your attention, you're not distracted. And the more concentrated and focused it is, the more internally relaxed it can be. And at that point, different insights and realizations just start flowing in on their own because you're not blocking them as much as during the day. So one way is to watch the breath. Another one is just with your eyes closed, just to look right in front of you. And actually, a lot of the teachers of this mention looking at a point in the center of the forehead, out in front of that. And it doesn't matter if it's dark or light or colored or black or whatever it is. It just to keep your focus looking at that in a completely relaxed manner. And just allowing the inside of your deeper self and of your source, whatever you want to call that. It can be God or spirit or just source. The Native Americans called it Great Spirit in their own language. It's not different according to what name you call it. It's a source of unconditional love and life that's keeping us alive every second. It's not there to punish or judge or do anything like that. Those are human level ideas. It's there to support all life and to bring us back into connection with it as soon as we're willing to have that happen. As long as we want judgment and evaluation of other people and ourselves in a, harsh, punishing type way, it'll let us do that as long as we feel like doing it. But when we're done and we realize that goes nowhere except dragging you down into experiences you don't want, then you can be pulled back toward where you came from, and it gets very interesting at that point. So during that relaxed focus, it's giving you a little bit of an experience of what you want to hold on to all during the day. So it's not like, going to church on Sunday and then being a mass murderer during the week and then coming back to church on Sunday and say, oh, sorry about the mass murdering thing, I'm back at the church now, everything's fine. Meditation's the same way. It's like you don't just meditate for a little while and say, okay, now I got my meditation done, I can go crazy for the rest of the day. The results aren't very good that way. They're in fact the opposite of what you're looking for. So the meditation is for giving you a little bit of a taste of a relaxed, focused, wide awake, observing, released type of non-tension focused consciousness that you have all day. So when you're in that state, you can evaluate things. Like, say you're working on your body and a certain thing is bothering you, and maybe you haven't even been aware of it because you've let yourself be so distracted every day that you just forget it. And when you're meditating, things come back to you that you've been screening out with chaotic thoughts all the time up till then. So say, you recognize that you've got a lot. I'm just using this as an example, but it could be anything. You've got a lot of fat around your abdominal area that you don't want there, and it's kind of bothering you, and you can't bend the way that you want to freely, and certain parts of your body feel strained or tense, or your joints are not as relaxed as you want them and stuff like that. You just start looking at that, and you're open to whatever might be really going on with it, and you're open to realizing connections that you never thought of before. As soon as you do notice a connection, then think about things you could do to test it. You know, maybe you're eating a dozen donuts every morning for breakfast, and you think, well, what if I ate 6 donuts instead of 12? It's the idea of the continuum that we'll talk about in a few minutes, and we have mentioned before. Even though who we are is not physical, and it doesn't matter what you call it, but people have called it things like pure spirit, or consciousness, or awareness itself, or the one who has the experience of using the mind and the brain and the body and the emotions, but it's not those things. It's the one who's experiencing them. That's you. And even though that you could call it pure spirit, for example, not physical, not even energy level, but the source of the energy. It came right out of the source, so it could only be made out of the source material. There wasn't any Home Depot when we were created to go get the parts for. It was long before we came to a physical body at all. And so, even though that's who we are, and it has no limitations, and it doesn't have any of the physical issues, it's not bothered by difficult thoughts because it's preliminary to even thought. When it came down like waterfalls, going one level to another, taking on denser and denser reality, and it finally got all the way down to physical form where, you know, the electrons and atoms are moving really slow, only 9/10 the speed of light. And compared to higher levels, everything is really dense here. And there's something that's very confusing at times, or misleading, and it's a delay between cause and effect because things are so slow here. And it means whatever you do, everything you do here has an absolute effect. There's nothing that's done that has no effect, but there's a delay factor. So, in other words, if you eat your dozen donuts every morning for your breakfast, the first day, all you do is have a good time with all the sugar. But really gradually over time, it starts to damage your internal organs, because sugar is very damaging. And it starts to put on fat, because fat comes primarily from junk food and from unused processed carbohydrates, not so much from fat. But it doesn't happen the first day, noticeably. And it takes time, and gradually that builds up. And so after a while, you start seeing an effect, but you don't think of the donuts because you've been eating those for 5 years every day, and it never did this before that you noticed. So you go to the doctor and he says, oh yeah, you need this drug because we did 25 tests on your blood, and this particular chemical is out of balance, but we have a new miracle drug that balances that chemical. And that's what you need, so you should start taking it right away. And thanks a lot for coming in. Go fill this prescription. Next. And then you take that prescription to the drugstore. You get, if you take the name off of it, that's pharmaceutical or drug or medicine, what is it that you're actually getting? It's a synthetic toxic chemical. It's not in the body's database of foods, but you're going to eat it by swallowing it. And the body notices it's being attacked by a toxic chemical, and it has a reaction. And when they tested that drug to see how it was going to work, and they tested it on some kind of animals that were unfortunate enough to be in that test, you would not want to be one of them. It's a very dangerous period in the world to be born as a rat, even compared to other times. But they did that experiment with that particular toxic chemical on the rat, and it caused like a list of 45 different disastrous effects on the rat. But effect number 46 was that this particular chemical in the rat's blood got reduced. And they said, oh, great, we've got a new medicine. Anybody with this chemical out of balance, we give them this toxic material that we just came up with in the lab, and give it a catchy name, I don't know. I'm not very good at that instantly. Other people are, but whatever they name it, and they start putting it on TV with pictures of bluebirds and people dancing and saying, if you have these kind of symptoms, here's all you need. Now, it may cause, and then they list the 45 things that it will do that are disastrous. But don't worry about that. Ask your doctor if it's right for you. And so millions of people do. Why? Because of resonance. Because there's this strong impression in the commercial with the bluebirds. It's got to be wonderful if there's bluebirds there, right? Even if they're animated. And you've got all these people dancing around smiling, and that's an emotion, and it has an energy. And if you're sitting there hypnotized by the television, especially if you're a kid without the usual defenses, you're going to start resonating and think, I need the drug, I need the drug. And then you'll take it, and it will fix the chemical imbalance usually, and it will give you 45 other serious problems that develop slowly enough so you don't realize they're caused by the drug. And you go back to the doctor and say, wow, that last medicine was great. Really fixed the problem. Now, since it was so good, maybe these 45 other problems that just came up by coincidence since then, nothing to do with that drug because it was so great, maybe I could get 45 other drugs to take care of them, then I'd really be in good shape. And that's what happens. It was a brilliant system. And it was originally thought up by, at least in the current time, the Rockefeller and Carnegie people prior to 1910 in this country. And at that time, they had a free market more or less in healthcare. In other words, if you wanted to be a herbalist and you knew enough to do it, you'd set up a shop. It didn't matter what degree you had. And you said, I'm an herbalist, and it charged, 25 cents. And you can come and get the right herb. And then people would come, and if they started dying or all got sick, you wouldn't get any more business. That's called the free market. And they had herbalists, and they had homeopaths, and even some people selling synthetic things, or, they didn't have the laboratories that they have now, but they had a lot of junk too, but they were all competing, and everybody talked to each other about the results. So the ones that made everybody sick didn't really do very well. And they had all kinds of stuff, physical therapy people, massage people, nutrition people, fasting teachers, all kinds of stuff. So the ones in charge of the Carnegie and Rockefeller Foundation said, this is a wonderful opportunity. What if we owned the whole system? And there was no competition because of the quotes that have come from there saying competition is a sin. That's what they meant. If you have intelligence, you show it by wiping out your competition and taking it over and using resonance, even though they didn't call it that, to make everybody think you're great while you're killing them for money. It works really well. It's happening all over the place. So they said, well, the way we need to do this is get massive funding for the ones that will fall within our system, and then we'll supply the medicines, in quotes. So it's amazing they can use that word, but they say, we'll supply the medicines, and everybody else will go out of business because we'll outcompete them by giving all this money to the ones that are going to go along with us. So they started by commissioning a report to be done. You can look it up. It's called the Flexner Report, Flexner. I believe it happened in 1910 in the U.S. And they sent these official representatives around to every school of healing of different kinds that they could find, any kind. And, some were already there trying to use essentially drugs, and other ones were using herbs. And they gave them a report on whether they were good or not. And they made a deal with government and using their own funding that only the ones that would fit into their drug system were good. Everybody else was what they would call now anti-science. So they had to be gotten rid of. They didn't actually shut them down. They just made sure they wouldn't get any money. And all the others they gave lots and lots of money to. And eventually what happened is they came to control the drug industry and the education in healthcare that taught doctors and health professionals that drugs were the answer to health, and later on they added other things like drugs such as radiation and things that the ideal therapy would be one that kept you very sick, in fact got you sicker and sicker, but it happened gradually and you wouldn't connect it to what they were doing to you. And then they would supply the remedy for the sickness that you got from their first remedy. And that would make you sick, and it would keep going. And it would eventually make billions of dollars. So they did that, and that was, not much more than 100 years ago in the U.S. They've been super successful. They are in charge of the curricula that all the doctors learn, that all the other health professionals learn, and of the drug industry, which supplies the medicine to make everybody healthy by killing them and making them sick and taking all their money. It's a great system. So the reason I bring it all up is a few things. One is to illustrate resonance, that the vast majority of people are still believing that by taking toxic chemicals, they're going to fix their health, or by having their organs cut out when the chemicals do too much damage, or by basically putting one of the strongest combinations of poison directly into a vein in your body. Sometimes it's called a port. They can put it right into your chest or your neck. And it's chemicals that, some of which are similar to the mustard gas and other things they used in World War I, and that would cure cancer by killing all the cells and hope that the cancer cells die first. But, of course, it'll do all these other terrible things to you, which you just have to accept because that's part of cutting-edge science. It's a complete scam. There are some people that recover with those therapies in spite of the therapies. But if you do something really damaging to your body, that's not what's making you recover. There's a life force in you that is always working to make you recover by itself. And, it isn't recovering in spite of these things sometimes, and a lot of times it can't. It just gives up, and the person can't stay in that body anymore. It's called dying. And so that happens. And the reason I'm kind of rambling around into that is that if you don't want the resonance of that system that convinces you that damaging your body is what makes it healthy, which is basically that belief, then you need an alternative, because your attention is going to grab onto something as long as you're here in a physical body. I haven't seen any examples of people being able to have their attention on nothing. It's always on something. That's its nature. So while it's really critical what you eat and drink, what you're eating on a finer level is what you're bringing in with your attention. And you remember, some people have talked about that if we put our attention on bad things happening in the world, that's a really big mistake, because it's going to bring in bad energy that's going to disrupt the rest of your experience here. And that's why we talked about splitting your attention. The emotional attention that you have does not have to go along with the strategic attention. So if you want to be aware of what's going on in the outside world, which is, I think, a good idea right now, because you can make better decisions for your life, you don't want to put your emotional side into that. So, for example, there's a lot going on right now with, even on a local personal level, you want to be aware that the things in the food store that are marked conventional or that are not marked organic should be marked grown with poison, because that's what they are. They should never be eaten by anybody, which of course is a big problem, because that's the vast majority of the food. If a lot of people knew about that, there wouldn't be enough food for everybody. So there has to be a big, renaissance, as we've said, in organic farming all over the place to fix that. But for the moment, you as an individual, you want to choose food that says organic, or that you can get it from a farmer or a gardener or somebody where it's organic, and it doesn't matter if it's certified. That's an example of something you have to be aware of. But being aware that something is grown with poison doesn't have to make you angry or depressed or, like you want to give up or anything like that. It's just an awareness. But the emotional part, that's what you want to put into what we were talking about in meditation. It's scanning for whatever is most uplifting and beautiful and inspiring to you. And as you find those things, whatever it is that really keeps you going, you leave it there and don't move it unless you're getting it to something better. So when you're observing yourself in the mirror or internally while you're meditating, or see what's going through your mind and your emotions, and in the mirror what's going on with your body, you're not putting a big emotional content onto that. In other words, you find a part of your body that's got a lot of fat deposited on it. You don't get upset or mad or angry or, depressed about that, or say, oh no, I'm falling apart, or I'm getting too old. Those are emotional resonances that you don't need. So you leave the emotional connection where it helps you, but you use the observing part to say, okay, that's interesting. I've got a lot of fat on my lower abdominal area, say. I wonder what could reverse that. And you start looking at everything you're doing during the day instead of, complaining about situations in your mind, or how bad some other person is, or, I really understand, but this other person's really dumb and they're saying all these dumb things. That's a waste of time, which is critically valuable. So you say, all right, maybe it was the 12 donuts I eat every day. I don't know, but it might be the ones I eat for breakfast, along with my Starbucks coffee or whatever I'm eating that's full of GMOs. And as you become aware and you're not threatened, you're not afraid to look at these things, because that's not where the emotional connection is. A lot of what people need to do for natural health solutions, is clear in what they would just do differently. But the big blockage is not that in itself it's so hard to do. It's that there's an emotional block, because they're putting the emotional connection in the wrong place. They're taking their emotional satisfaction from the GMO, coffee in the morning, or I don't mean that the coffee itself necessarily is GMOs. It's only grown with standard poison, but it's got GMO additives and maybe some kind of a synthetic creamer and, who knows what else. It's not normal food. And GMOs affect the body, and so do the poisons, atrazine and Roundup and all of these other sprays. They should never be manufactured, but they are, so you have to be aware and not drink them by eating things that are saturated with them. That would be good. So you start becoming aware of these things that might have an effect, and you start being aware everything that you do every second absolutely has a specific effect. Every thought on this level, when you came into a physical body, this is how it works. Every thought, everything that you feel, everything that you've allowed yourself to think, has an absolute specific effect. And that has two sides to it. One is, with most people, that ends up over years destroying them, and they have to leave that body. Die. Right, if you want to say that. But dying is a very misleading term. It's not really what it seems. And the other side of it, besides gradually destroying ourselves with all these things that we allowed ourselves to resonate with and get attached to, the other side of it is that since everything has an effect that is essentially unstoppable, it's an effect that has to happen given the right amount of time. That is a clue toward massive power that every single person has individually, internally. No one even has to know that you're using it, because everybody's using it, but mostly they're using it in a chaotic, self-destructive manner. And the meditation and the self-observation is what allows you to start changing that. So you set up an experiment and say, well, what if I only ate 10 donuts instead of 12? And so that's called moving along the continuum. And a continuum just is a fancy word they use in math class, and it means line. A line going from one side to the other side. And it's just to point out that on one end of the line is a total junk food diet, and on the other end of the line is something very clean that goes into your body. And so if you're willing to be aware of yourself and all the little habits during the day, you can tell where on that line you are. And if you're worried about some fat that you want to get rid of, or something that doesn't feel right in a joint, for example, or problem with your breath isn't as relaxed as it should be, or maybe your endurance is not good, or you get tired, right away with a little bit of exercise, or you get headaches, or whatever it is, if it's something that you're not really too concerned about, and you're willing for it to get better very, very slowly, then you set up experiments where you move slightly to the other side on the continuum. So you eat 10 donuts for breakfast when you always have eaten 12. You're going to have to watch carefully because it might not make much of a change. If you wanted to move a little further on the continuum, you'd eat 6 donuts instead of 12. Or if you wanted to be really radical about it and just try something amazing, you might not even eat any donuts in the morning. Especially if you find out what's in them, because along with the attitude of being willing to see what you're doing, you look in your computer and you see what's in a donut. And you find out that, it's made out of flour and sugar and a few other things. And what's flour? Well, usually it starts out with a plant that has a seed, and the plant's called wheat. It's a grass. So it's a grass seed, which is wheat. It's been used by humans for a long time. And they take the seed off of the grass plant, put a whole bunch of those seeds together, and grind them up, and they become what's called flour. And then they put chemicals in there to preserve it and to make it white color, because everybody thinks it must be purer that way. And sometimes they put a lot of other things in it that you wouldn't even imagine that anybody would ever eat. And then they let it sit in a container for a long time, because once it's got the chemicals in it, the chemicals poison the normal microorganisms that would break the flour down and compost it back to the earth. Those microorganisms are all killed if they try to get in and break down that flour. So that's what's called extending shelf life. It's not something good for you. And the other thing is that as soon as you grind up a seed, it starts to do what's called oxidizing. It loses its nutritional qualities, and it becomes destructive to health. And then if they grow that wheat that the seed came off of, that they grind up to make the flour, and they grow that wheat with poison, and even if they grow it with chemical fertilizer, even if they didn't poison it, use of chemical fertilizer unbalances the soil microorganisms and the nutrient availability in the soil. And it makes the plant unbalanced and unhealthy. And that's the main thing that leads to the requirement for poison on agriculture, was chemical fertilizer. The guy that we talked about named Justus von Liebig, if you remember, he was a German chemist. He's the one who figured out that more than 100 years ago, they could take synthetic forms of 3 chemicals. Actually, they're minerals: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And if you just put enough of those dissolved in water in the soil that the plant's growing on, that the plant would grow fast and large. Now, the nutrient content of the plant would be completely messed up, and whatever animal or human ate it would get the effects of that. But the plant would grow fast, and it would become heavy, and it could be sold for more money. And Justus von Liebig became famous and became known as the father of modern agriculture. But as is often the case with these great discoveries, and the people that make them. By the end of his life, he said, I made a massive mistake. I mean, it was an understatement, because he destroyed the majority of the agriculture of the world as far as producing good food. And that's where the justification for pesticides came from, because the plants were so unbalanced and unhealthy and weakened that the insects and the diseases that are in nature to wipe out inferior plant species or inferior plant specimens so that they don't multiply, they started descending in mass on every crop of wheat and everything else that was grown, because it was grown with chemical fertilizers instead of fixing up the soil the way it should be. And the poison manufacturers were able to demonstrate that without poison all the crops would die, and they did, because they were grown with the wrong fertilizer and the soil wasn't the way it should be. So if you start looking a little bit deeper into these things, you're not going to want the donuts. And you start realizing, wait a minute, the taste that I got myself addicted to, which is of the sugar and maybe the chemicals that go with it, I'm using that to set the stage for degenerative disease in my body. Maybe it's not going to be tomorrow or next week, but imperceptibly and very gradually it's going to come on. And I'm going to end up getting a number of different really serious diseases. And the solution is not going to be obvious, so I'm going to be really pressured to take the drugs or the toxic chemicals that they're prescribing for it. And that's going to give me more diseases. This is not going to be very good. And that's what's happening to millions and millions of people all over the world every day. And it's once you get to that stage, it's very difficult to see through it. So it's easier and wiser if you start before that happens. But even if you start after it's happened, you can reverse it. So you have to learn about cleaning out the old junk that you've already eaten. That's called detoxification. And you have to learn about putting better things in, which is called nutrition. And the detoxification really has to come first in most cases, because when we've been eating things that have poison in them, or we get environmental toxins, or we build up the fallout from chemtrails and nuclear fallout and all this junk that's in the environment that comes into the body through breathing and eating and drinking and through your skin, all these different ways, that gets stored by the body in the cells. And you have somewhere between, the latest things I've read are between 25 and 100 trillion cells in your body, 90% of which, by the way, are not human cells. They're beneficial bacteria, microorganisms that you need in order to stay alive, all working in incredible organization to keep your body functioning for as long as possible. So when you're eating food every day and your body's using most of its energy to process the food, then it doesn't have the energy to go into the cells where it's stored the toxins that came in and get rid of them. And so they just stay there building up in the cells. And when they build up to a certain point, they start causing problems, which are categorized by doctors as diseases and reasons to give you some kind of a poisonous drug to make everything great. So it's better to get rid of those stored toxins before they build up to that point, and then you don't have to deal with the drugs and the diseases and all the pain that goes with that. You can just avoid it. And there's a built-in way that nature made for doing that detoxification. It's called fasting. And it's been talked about since the beginning of humans. But we've got a recent version, only 2,000 years old, that is in the Essene Gospel of Peace, Volume 1. That's why we put it on the website, because it's very useful if you can begin to understand what it's saying. And at that time, the remedy that the best health teachers were giving was go to a peaceful place out in nature, hopefully in good part of the year weather-wise, but whatever you have to do, and where you have clean water and fresh air and clean earth to walk on for grounding and sunlight, and don't eat. And what happens when you don't eat, it's also called fasting, is that your body says, oh, wow, I don't have to process food today. What's the next most important thing for me to do? Because it immediately goes to that. And the next most critical thing in most people is removing the poison that's been stored up. So in every cell of the body, all at once, it starts gradually moving the toxic material out of the cell to get rid of it. And it can go out through the gut, through the kidneys, through the breath, through the skin. Bad smelling sweat, that's toxins coming out. That's not a normal, healthy state. But it's an important process, as long as you don't put more of them in. Eventually, there's no bad smell in the sweat no matter what, even if you're not washing the body for a month. It smells fresh. And if it doesn't, it's a clue to you of what's going on, and you need to help it if you want good results from that. So as the poison residue comes out of the cells and on the way out of the body, it has to go through a period of circulating in the blood. And during that time, you don't feel good. And depending on what the poison is, if it's old concentrated drugs that you took or some poison from food or whatever, then that's the effect that it's going to create while it's circulating until it's out. First it circulates in the blood, makes you feel bad, and then it goes out. So there are ways to speed that up, and we've talked about that before. Resting during fasting is important, but a little bit of movement is also good because it gets your body cleaner faster, especially in fresh air. Body temperature water enemas are critical too, and those are discussed in the Essene Gospel, and in the modern good health teachers all talk about the same thing. Marcus Rothkranz has a great video about using enemas, and the Gerson people do too. You find them on YouTube for free. So in modern times, you have to use that technique of fasting really carefully because we were so toxic, even much more than the people in the old times, that you have to not do too much of it at once. And they've found that using vegetable juices, if you drink them right after you make them and they don't have time to oxidize, those give the body a little bit of an extra nutrition boost without needing any digestion, as long as you strain them before you drink them. There's no solid. And people like Rudolf Bruce made those into therapies. There's a great book called The Bruce Cancer Cure. It's got a lot of teas in it, which I think are probably not necessary, but he's using small amounts of vegetable juice and reporting that almost all of his advanced cases of cancer that he treated with that completely recovered. It's called being cured, but you're not supposed to talk about that now. And I should reiterate at this point, I'm not telling you to do that. I'm not giving you any medical advice or anything. I'm just telling you what Rudolf Bruce did. And if I had cancer for some reason, which is not likely when you get your body clean, something like that is what I would do. And I've just talked to someone who went through that cancer cure who's in Austria. And in fact, their father was cured of prostate cancer by going through that in 42 days, which is the length of that treatment. And the only thing that Bruce really didn't get into very much was what you need to eat after that. Because after the detox phase, if you go right back to the donuts, it's not going to be very good. And in fact, apparently, once you have something like cancer, what I've noticed is that people tend to get relapsed back into it if they're not careful. And there's some kind of weakness that happens, but if you take good care of the body after that, you don't have that happen. So the nutrition afterwards comes back to the question of where on the continuum do you want to be. And if you have a really serious health condition, you probably don't want to do like changing from 10 donuts in the morning to 8. You really want to stop with the processed food right away. This is, just so you don't think it's just my opinion, Matt Monarch gives great talks on this on YouTube, therawfoodworld.com. Really good teacher. I just communicated with him a few days ago. I found him quite inspiring. And he's one of the few long-term raw food vegans that appreciates the value of raw milk. He doesn't say that much because his followers would probably come and lynch him or something. But privately, he does know about it, as does Dr. Cousins. We just talked with him about it yesterday. And it looks like, pretty far toward the other end of the continuum is if you go past vegetable juice, which is liquid nourishment that is very, very light and powerful and it's good for healing. You get into raw, fresh, organic, live food, which is what Dr. Cousins and others promote and have healed many, many people that way. But we're talking, and in fact, we're going to have Dr. Cousins on tomorrow night. So, or no, I'm sorry, not tomorrow night. It's going to be, we just finished him for this month. So it's going to be next month. I'll talk to you about tomorrow night a little bit later here shortly. But I have talked to Dr. Cousins a lot recently, directly, and he acknowledges the fact that in the old days, the rishis, these are really wise teachers, especially in India, that meditated a lot, some of them almost all the time, and had groups of people that they taught. They were using raw, live, organic, vegan food plus raw milk. And the raw milk that they used was done properly. In other words, they didn't kill the babies, they didn't kill the old goats and cows or camels or whatever they were using. They treated them with great respect, appreciative for the help that they got from them. And they shared the milk with the babies. They let the babies drink as much as they want. And they didn't process it. They didn't do anything that would kill the bacterial and other microorganism activity in the milk, because that's a physical reflection of the life force of the milk. They were obviously careful not to ever get it dirty, because that can make any food dangerous, even spinach, as they showed recently when a bunch of people got sick from eating contaminated spinach with sewage sludge on it. Tried to blame that on raw food, by the way. But the milk was not treated with anything, and they just drank it right away. It was an incredible superfood, which you know by the government seal of approval program, because it's the first food that the U.S. government went after as a natural food to try to totally eradicate, and they've come close. It needs to be brought back. So the nutrition ultimately is, reasonable amounts of fresh, raw, live, vegan food, and correctly used and produced raw milk. And as far as physical food, that's enough for the body. But if you're not emotionally ready for that, then you move toward it gradually. It's just that the people coming off these really serious health conditions, like the ones that go through the Bruce cure and things like that, they have a better chance to go right to, mostly at least live food, and certainly 100% organic and no processed food, because they've gone through weeks of juice fasting and their tastes have changed. If you take, one of the things that fasting does, in addition to cleaning out the cells, or allowing the cells to clean themselves out, is that it changes your taste completely. And it's very likely that after the time of fasting and the juice diet and things like that, you have no interest in donuts. It's just gone. And you start seeing fresh things as a lot more appetizing. And you also have to stay conscious of quantity and not just, stuff yourself completely with even the best food, although it's not as damaging. It's still not as good for you. And if you want to end up in the best condition, you want to really watch the quantity and don't eat until your tongue starts being unable to enjoy it. That's what the majority of people actually do. But you watch the effect on your body, how your stomach feels, how your gut feels, how your state of sleepiness versus being awake feels, because you don't want to put yourself to sleep by getting stuffed. And you stop before you get any kind of subtle negative effect. It works great. You stay naturally much more happy, your energy's a lot lighter, and you have, a lot more enthusiasm for everything. It works really well. But you have to be observant enough, like we talked about, of how your feeling is changing while you're eating, and stop before it starts getting heavy. It takes practice. So besides the food, you want to, give your body other things. Take care of it with gradually increasing sunlight exposure, watching your response to it. You don't want to get burned or, anything like that. And it takes some time, but the cleaner your body gets from fasting and from live food nutrition, the effect of sunlight on your skin is completely changed. And I don't see that from reading it anywhere. I've observed this in lots of people, and I've experienced it in myself. And it doesn't happen suddenly, because remember, there's the delay factor. But it definitely happens, and you get to a point where your skin just doesn't burn. And on the way to that, if you want to use something on your skin to keep it from getting dried out, then use something that's edible, because that's the rule. If you want to have, the right cosmetic things and body care products and all that to use on your skin, just follow the rule that if it's not healthy to eat, don't ever put it on your skin. Like we've talked about hair dye, which almost everybody uses, being one of the most cancer-causing and toxic chemicals that you can find. It also really pollutes the water table in the ground. But on your body, it goes right in through the thin skin on your scalp, right into the blood, and it's not a good idea. There is this one called hairprint that you can look up that apparently has a natural combination of things that is not deadly, and it can work for people with naturally brown or black hair. But almost anything that they sell for hair dye is extremely damaging. And the other things for most of the makeup sold for women and some for men, and deodorants have toxic aluminum in them. They're very dangerous. Almost everything that's sold for body care products is damaging. But raw extra virgin coconut oil that's organic, Bronner's has a good brand, but there's a bunch of other ones. You can put that on your skin, and your skin actually eats it. And it seems to be really good for it, and it seems to be good for hair as well. In not overwhelming amounts, but enough to keep the hair somewhat oiled, and I've noticed a correlation in the experiments I mentioned doing between the hair drying out and turning gray. Because I noticed my own hair had turned almost entirely gray. A long time ago, I actually fell for the hair dye scam. So I mention it to you not as somebody saying, oh, you're really dumb to use that stuff. I did almost every stupid thing I can think of in health practices, and that's the way I had to learn. So one of the reasons I'm doing this show is so that hopefully you don't have to make as many painful mistakes as I did. But even after I turned my hair entirely gray, I was observing, like I was telling you about this morning, setting up experiments where you observe and try to notice connections. And I noticed the more hair dye I used, this was a long time ago, that in between, the faster the hair turned gray. And I thought, wait a minute, what's going on with that? And I thought, well, the global corporations at the top levels are absolutely ruthless. Whatever they can do to make more money, even if it kills you, as long as it doesn't kill you too fast, and they get to take all your money in the process, they'll do it in a second. If they can get away with it legally, even if it's not legal, they'll do it. Even if they get caught and the penalty is less than the profit they make, they'll do it again and again. The banks do this all the time, laundering money for drug cartels. Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and all these other ones, they're in the drug business indirectly by laundering the money. And as long as the penalty is like 1% of the profit they make, they'll keep doing it. If you want details, this is something covered very well on Alex Jones's show. So that continues to be a spectacular news resource. And I highly recommend anybody who wants somewhat of an idea of what's going on in the unpleasant world around us on the human level, political level, to pay the $6 a month to see the TV version on the computer. And it's at prisonplanet.tv. Instead of .com, it's .tv. Amazing show. And I don't know how long it'll be allowed to keep going, but it's still going now, and the educational value there is huge. Anyway, I noticed with this hair thing, that my hair was turning gray faster, so I stopped it. And I found out shortly after that it's highly carcinogenic, causes cancer, and it poisons every organ in the body, and you really don't want to be using it. It might be humiliating to have gray hair when you want it to be blonde or black or brown or something, but compared to killing your organs, it's probably, if you think carefully, it's better to suffer through having hair that's gray, and besides, there are things you can do. So I stopped using that, and I further upgraded at that time what I was eating, did more fasting, and I started experimenting with coconut oil because I noticed that the gray hair that was all over my head had this really thin, kind of wiry, different feel to it. It was like it got, maybe a quarter as thick as the other hairs and started getting brittle. So I thought, that's kind of interesting. Never thought about that before. And I started using the coconut oil that I was already using on my skin. I started putting it into my hair and kind of lightly massaging it in the morning. As soon as I started doing that, I noticed that the hair was absorbing the oil, and that when it absorbs the oil, it reacts with light differently. And the light couldn't go through it as easy. And it didn't look clear because the gray hair is really kind of clear and lets light go right through it. And it started changing. And over years of gradually getting the nutrition better and better, fasting one day every week to keep the detox program going, about 90% of my hair became brown again, which was kind of fun. I like that. Not completely. I've still got some that's gray, but radically different than how it was, and I still use the coconut oil on it. So really helpful to know about that. The other aspect I need to mention to you, and then I'm going to quit pretty soon here, is that the image that it's like, remember we talked about how important it is what you keep your attention on all day, and eventually that'll affect what you keep it on all night when you're dreaming and sleeping. It's also important, part of that attention is always on an image, like a monitoring camera or something that you have inside your mind, an image of what you see as yourself. And there's a great book on that called Psycho-Cybernetics, written by a guy named Maxwell Maltz, M-A-L-T-Z, in the 60s, but it's still available on Amazon. And he was a plastic surgeon. And he noticed that what was really the successful cases of plastic surgery that he did, mostly on people's faces, was when the change in their face also went along with a change in self-image, and he used the term self-image. And when the person still kept seeing themselves as inadequate or ugly or in some way, then the surgery wasn't successful. And then eventually he figured out, wow, what if you could change the self-image without the surgery? And that started the interesting part of his research. The book's about that. So if you tune into that and you learn to change your self-image, this is part of what people have called loving yourself, but it's been misunderstood. In other words, people think loving yourself means making believe you're really enamored of some qualities that you have. Like you see somebody and you think they look really cool or amazing or impressive in some way, and you'd like to be like them, and so you have this incredible admiration from them. It's not like that at all. It's like a gift. It's something you give yourself. Like if you have a child that you're taking care of, and you give them love, it's not because you decided, wow, I think that child's spectacular. No, it's because you want them to be their spectacular self, so you give them support and encouragement from where they are now. And you just pour it on them, and eventually it has an effect. And the kid starts having self-confidence, and they develop all of their best qualities. That's the kind of love they're talking about. And then they're saying, have that love for yourself. And part of doing that is deciding to have a good self-image. Because your self-image has very little to do with what, your outer self is really like. It has to do with what you decide to give yourself. And if you're loving yourself to that degree, you become capable of loving other people and nothing more. And I totally missed that for decades. I was told it directly. I had no idea what it meant. But it means you just decide to give overwhelming love and approval to yourself, and that opens up what you can give to other people in your life, and it gets a lot more satisfying. It gets us closer back to our normal state, which is incredible. It's way beyond any drug high. And just so you don't think I'm talking about only methamphetamine or cocaine or crack addicts on the street, or even people addicted to marijuana, which makes you calm down and not care about what's going on. No, I'm talking about all of us are on drugs, but it can be very subtle. It can be the 10 donuts. It can be a power trip over somebody at work. It can be a subtle thought that you really got it together and somebody else that you're related to doesn't. These are drugs. And we take them in order to feel better or to become less aware of what's bothering us. And when you start getting the slightest clue that your normal state is spectacular, way beyond any drug high that anybody ever imagined, then you say, whoa, I think I want to be aware of what's bothering me, so I can let it go or see what it says I should be doing better, not what somebody else should be doing better. Because if I do that, if I'm brave enough to do that, then I start getting in touch with my normal condition. And the process is not some kind of an uncomfortable stress discipline type process. It's an outcome of giving love to yourself, because part of that is giving yourself permission to see things and know that the solution, don't worry, the solution is not going to be terrible. It's going to be good. It's going to be something that you're going to like better than what's going on now. It's going to be okay. And no matter where you are now, it gets you into a better feeling place than the current one. And once you realize that and you get over the fear that, oh, if I let myself be aware of what's going on, I'm going to have to do something terrible. Or maybe I'm going to, it's going to ruin my relationship with somebody, or it's going to make me lose a job that I'm attached to. Or you just stop worrying about that stuff. Because if it's a real solution, it's going to be saturated with this feeling of love. Even if there's somebody that you're relating to that is a really destructive relationship, it's not going to tell you to attack them. It's going to either tell you that you're benefiting from staying in that relationship and, exchanging and getting the lessons that you get from being there, or in a very positive way, not being there anymore, but not running away, and not having to, you don't have to attack anybody. The more centered in yourself you become, the less vulnerable you are to any kind of attack of any kind. So it kind of reminds me this, when you start getting this exhilaration of what it feels like to be willing to look at yourself. A long time ago, many decades ago now, almost 50 years, when I was in the university, and the atmosphere of universities had not become insane like it is in most of them now. The professors were actually regular people, and they would sit out, at night with us in very beautiful physical surroundings. A lot of these universities have spectacular grounds that they've bought, or the state buys with the tax money. And they would talk to us, and for late into the night, thinking about how we could solve the world problems. And they were really sincere. It was incredible. And we can have that now. Just drop all the pretense, drop all the criticism, drop all the fear and the worry and the need to say who's, better than who else and what somebody else is doing that's terrible. You just drop all that stuff and you realize the power point is in yourself, and what can you do to access it closer? And you're the teacher for yourself, really not anybody else. So, besides that, I'm going to quit in a minute unless anybody wants to say anything or ask anything. And I do want to mention to you a couple of things. One is that Alex Newman is a guest tomorrow night. Incredible that we're able to get him on the show. I first saw him on Alex Jones's show. He's a foreign correspondent for the New American Magazine. Really sharp guy. He teaches economics at an amazing school called Freedom Project Academy. Freedom Project, FPE.USA. Not A, but E like Edward, FPE.USA. It's a previous version of their name. Is their website, fpeusa.org, I think. And so he's going to be on talking about economics so we can start understanding how economics works in your life. Because the reason it's important and it's a health issue is that if you're struggling constantly and you don't have what you need on the physical level, and if you're in a family and everybody in the family has to be working and there's nobody to take care of the kids, this has a massive social impact, and it's not by chance. This was exactly why the rulers that we have decided that they should destroy our economy in America. And I find this incredibly interesting. It's not boring like it might be made in a school that doesn't teach it very well. It's a really critically important subject, and we're going to realize that when they finish off what's left of the economy, and we have no way to survive except taking food and everything directly from the government. Because that's not going to be very good food. It's going to be GMO food. It's going to be full of drugs. It's going to have things in it, maybe microchips, and we'd rather not get to that point if we can avoid it. So now, while the economy is still functioning a little bit, at maybe 2% of normal in the U.S., and they're working on wiping out the rest of it, we need to access our creativity and come up with alternatives that will keep the economic system, not the system we have, but a healthier economic system going. And right now is when we have to be thinking about that. And if you want to be, part of coming up with new economic systems and other systems that we need to try to make the earth healthy again so that the rulers don't succeed in destroying the whole biosphere, in order to have your maximum creativity, you have to get your body working as well as you can. You got to get rid of the toxins, because one of the things they do when they're sitting in cells all over your body is they make your mind foggy. And when you upgrade your lifestyle, your eating and drinking and sleeping, you have to sleep enough. And it's better to sleep at night. And I should have mentioned that before. If you do that, it helps absolutely everything, including your clarity of mind. But if you upgrade your lifestyle that way and get rid of the poisons that you're putting on your skin, and stop eating food with poison in it and things like that, your mind works completely different. You're going to see other people and you're going to wish good things for them instead of thinking how dumb they are for one reason or another. And you're just going to wish well for everybody. And you're going to start coming up with ideas, and you're not even maybe going to know where they come from. But your brain is amazing, but it's not the origin of your thoughts. The mind is something that's not even physical. And when you're in a physical body, it hooks into the brain. And the brain is like a switching station. And so if you want the full inspiration that your mind is going to give you to come through into your brain so you can be aware of it, you got to have your brain working normally. And it can't do that if the blood supply to it is polluted. So if you get that, and you want to be part of coming up with the new solutions that are needed, then you need to clean out your bloodstream. And once it's cleaned out, you have to put more of the living nutrients in it that make it function. the minerals and all these things that should be in the food in the right form. And if you're watching, then every time you change your diet with the idea of something that might help you, you watch. How is this affecting my clarity of thought? How's it affecting my physical endurance? Okay, what if I change over like this? I'm not just the 8 donuts to 6 donuts, but what if, I go from donuts to eating cooked whole oats that I ground up myself right before I cooked them so they didn't oxidize. Maybe it's not live food and raw food, but it's way better. It's still got life force in it, because when you grind up a grain and you let it sit, it oxidizes into junk, even if it's what they call whole grain. But if you're going to use a grain and you prepare it right before you're going to consume it, or you grind it up if you have to right before you do it, you can eat, bread that you make from ground up grain right before you make the bread and right before you eat it is completely different than bread in the store that may be 6 months old. Even if it's 3 days old, it's not nearly as good. And then you move away from bread and the carbohydrate stuff into more of the living food, and it gets, again, way better. And you notice that your mind clears considerably. And there has to be some of us that do this in order to contribute to the collective awareness of the planet that's going to come up with these solutions. And economics is one of the areas that has to be done. So what we're going to talk about with Alex tomorrow night is going to be a lot of this stuff, and we're going to go into how banking works and what's really going on with the whole economic system, the Federal Reserve, the value of the money, purchasing power, how governments are controlled by money, and things I think are really interesting, not just to know that, these bad things are happening, but to know about possible solutions. And so, I would invite you to be part of that. And the reason for bringing physical health into it is because without the physical health, it's really hard not to walk around in a fog. I know, because I walked around in a fog that way for a long time. And every time you improve it, then instead of thinking, okay, now I'm not walking around in a fog, I really see what's going on, you have to get rid of that mindset as well and recalibrate. Because remember, when you were in a fog, you thought you weren't. And that's what made it last so long. Because it took a long time before you were willing or able to admit that you were walking around in this self-generated fog. And you can bet absolutely that all of us are still doing that. It's just on a finer level. So what you do is the clearer level that you get to, you recalibrate your awareness and you think, all right, I'm still walking around in a complete fog compared to where I need to be at the next step. So let me acknowledge that. Say, I'm in a dense fog. What do I do now, like I did before, to get to where I'm going? And you have all kinds of tools you can use. Everything you do during the day can be upgraded. Every single thing that you eat and drink and think and feel during the day can be upgraded if you're willing to do it. Movement, like we've talked about, starting to move and exercise instead of, if you eat the best food in the world and you sit around all day and you don't move much, your whole lymph system doesn't work. It's a circulation system like your blood, but it doesn't have a heart that it's connected to. The only thing that moves it to clean out your cells and the fluid around them and all that is muscle contraction. It's what they call exercise. So if you're not used to exercise, you just start walking a little bit. Even if you start 10 feet the first day, then do 12 feet the next day. It's called progressive overload, as if your body realizes it has to build its strength and endurance up to handle the next level that you're giving it of challenge. It will do that. You don't do it radically or severely in the beginning. You do it very gradually. But if you have an area that you don't like the muscle tone, or, sometimes women will focus on their arms because a lot of times they don't put any kind of resistance on their arms, and they don't know why the tissue kind of gradually falls apart. And men have exactly the same thing, not only on arms, but all over the body. And it as long as you're alive, it can come back. So even if you're in a wheelchair, you can get the lymph flowing by exercising your arms and wheel yourself around every day instead of just sitting in one place too much. And if you have to be in one place to work at a desk, Dr. Mercola has been running really interesting articles about the importance of every hour or so moving, or maybe every half hour. And your mind works better, you do your work better, you think of more unusual, creative things that you wouldn't think of if you're not in motion. And other people have pointed out that motion and emotion go together, and if you don't move and don't get the muscle contraction, then your emotion reflects that, and you can get depressed or angry or frustrated, and a lot of it is just because of the buildup of toxic waste products in your body that you can't get rid of because you're not moving. So that no matter what kind of health program you're up to, what diet you're on, whether you're on a juice fast or you're just cutting down the number of donuts you're eating, or whatever point you're at, which is not good or bad, it's just what you're doing at the moment. You need to complement that with the appropriate form of movement. And if you're used to a certain level and you're kind of what they call plateaued because it's gotten easy, then you need to go to the next reasonable level for you. And when you get used to that, you go to the next level after that. And you just start feeling better and better instead of stagnating. So I want to encourage everybody to do what we first said, which is evaluating yourself every day, all during the day. Get used to doing it all the time. And give yourself, out of the sense of love and giving a gift to yourself, give yourself something not to stress yourself, but to give you the next uplifting level of how you're changing what you're eating or drinking, what you're thinking, and do it as an experiment every day, and the kind of movement you're doing. So Alex is going to be on tomorrow night talking about the health issue, which is called economics, and how that affects our lives and what we can potentially do with it. The video subscription service is going, so if you feel like being in that, I'm going to be making that more and more directly personal in the coming days. So I recommend that to people. Now that, originally I thought, well, in addition to wanting to interact with you face-to-face on video, because that's doing what I told you to do, it's pushing my envelope, because I did not want to be on video. I didn't even want to be on radio, but especially not on video. So I thought, well, I'm encouraging you to push outside what your comfort zone is in a good, positive, constructive way. So I have to do that too, right? But I also need money to continue in the work of Lost Arts, but we don't have enough people to even come close to doing that so far. So I'm going to push myself into doing more private consultations if people are in, really severe situations where they have to deal with life-threatening conditions and things like that. I will give them appointments. Those are more expensive, but if we get some more of those, again, it'll help keep us on the air, and I have to do what I can to do that. If we get millions of people in the video subscription service, it would also do it, but we're not there, so we'll see what happens. But even with the few that we've got now, I'm going to start immediately making that much more personal and showing that I'm putting myself on the line in the same way that I'm asking you to do. And I'll share with you the results that I get, because I've got to push to the next level now, and I'm going to really start changing my routine in certain ways, even though it's pretty healthy during the day now. For example, the movement area that I've been talking about, I've gotten pretty comfortable with the exercise program that I'm doing, so I'm completely pushing through that starting a few days ago, and I'm going to share the results that happen from that on the video subscription service. So You might find that interesting. Also remember to look at Doug's site. He's the one holding the whole show together, all the infrastructure of it, all the electronics, a lot of input of ideas and things like that. That's diamonddiscaudio.com, and find out what he's doing also with his main business. The newsletter I've started making every week. I'm going to try to keep up with that. I actually got this one out in time, talking about the upcoming show and a little bit of insight on that or anything else interesting that's happening. And I guess those are the main things I wanted to tell you. So before I escape, since Dee is online from California, let's see what Dee is thinking about. Good morning, Dee. How are you doing?
Good morning, Richard. I just say thank you again. And I've been doing my homework, like you said, to let you know how that's going.
Good. Excellent.
Yeah, I've been observing my process that go on in my mind just during the day. I'm mostly alone. I don't have a lot of other interactions with other people most of the time. But, boy, you know, talking to myself is just a challenge. It's like,
yes.
I don't need anybody else.
It's the most challenging person in anybody's life is themselves.
I guess, because I've just been observing the thoughts and what, are they positive, are they negative, and where are they coming from, and just asking a lot of questions of the thoughts when they pop up. So I'm kind of taking I got an epiphany, which was what you keep saying is every time our I don't know what you call them, I guess you call them rulers or leaders or whatever, and turn around what they're saying to get what they're really saying.
Right.
So you're doing a 180 turnaround to get the truth out.
You have to check that, because once in a while they may tell the truth by mistake or for some other reason. But in general, yeah, you're right.
So I've been trying to apply that rule to my own thoughts, because they're programs that I got from those areas, and so I decided to turn the thoughts 180 degrees around and just look at them the other way around, like flipping a coin over and seeing what the other side says before I make a judgment on it.
Right.
And that's been just eye-opening. I mean, what is with all these not well-wishing thoughts that are in my programming? I want well-wishing thoughts in my programming, so to reprogram everything, I have to really, like, around and around and look at it and try to figure out, you know, how to do that.
Yeah, it's a full-time job, actually, meaning 24 hours a day.
Yeah, every second, every single thought. It's just amazing how much negativity is built into that.
Yeah, exactly, and that opens you up to all kinds of things that appear to be outside attacks. You know, one of the strongest defenses against everything is having nothing going out of you but what you're calling the well-wishing thoughts. It's really, really hard to tie in any negative energy to you from the outside if that's what's coming out of you.
Yeah, but like even what you're talking about, like if you had a child and you were going to just really encourage them and tell them everything good, and I know that we can apply that to ourselves.
Right.
I was thinking about even my own children. I get really judgmental about them, not, you know, but I figured out that it comes down to my own expectations of them.
Right.
Or my own expectations of myself, too.
Well, the reason you get expectations of other people is because you don't want to have them of yourself. If you put all your expectations on yourself, you stop expecting things of other people.
Oh, okay. So that's part of the turning it around.
Yeah, all the power is in yourself. So the power to be satisfied with anything is all self-generated. And once you take responsibility for that and realize you've got 100% of that power yourself, you don't need to change anybody else.
No need to. Okay. I'm writing this down. I'll forget.
It's very free. It's really freeing, because once you realize that you have that ability to completely satisfy all aspects of yourself from internally, then you just start appreciating everybody else instead of wanting to change them.
Okay, so it's expect versus appreciate.
Yeah, the appreciation is the normal state. It's like when you're walking around outside and it's a good exercise to start looking in nature around you at how perfect everything is. You know, when you see the leaf of a plant or something like that, it's like this amazing artwork. And we just walk by it and we never notice.
Right.
And I mean, your whole life is like walking through an art gallery. And we've been doing that without noticing any of the paintings.
How do you slow it down to where you have the notion?
You find out where you're holding yourself tense in your body. And you tune into it without any stress. And you give it permission to relax.
Okay.
And you do that as long as you can find tense spots in your body or your mind. And you let them relax. The more you do that, the calmer and calmer you're going to get. And I don't mean just lying there, you know, without moving. I'm talking about even if you have to be digging a ditch, you're in the same state. Even if you have to be running, you're in the same state. So if master martial artists are in that state all the time, they're lightning fast. And they're incredibly strong because of the power that comes through them because of their total relaxation. And they don't get tired. So it's because the thing that gets you tired is holding things tense.
You think that brain damage can do that? Because I have so much nerve stress that I can't even remember to breathe sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, we've all got a lot of damage because we didn't know what we were doing when we got born here, most of us. But the body has a current of energy flowing through it. It's called prana or chi or lots of other names in different traditions. And that energy is not just like some kind of inanimate electrical current. It's conscious, and it has a purpose. And it's very wise, and it sees all levels of these things at once. It's way beyond what the intellect can grasp. And what its purpose is normal and balance and optimum state of everything. And it's where healing comes from. I mean, healing comes from the source, which is, you know, spirit or God or nature or whatever you want to call it. But it comes through this current called prana. And so the current's coming into the body. It's more essential than air or food. And it has unlimited healing power to regenerate. So if you allow that in, brain damage can be largely healed. Okay,
so what if your nerve sheaths are being eaten away? Is there a way to rebuild that?
Yeah, there's a reason they'd be eaten away, and it's not being in harmony with this healing current in you. And you've got this belief in you that your nerve sheaths are being eaten away and your body's obeying that. It's a belief system.
Huh.
I mean, if you were putting some actual toxin in your body that eats nerve sheaths, then, of course, that's a special situation. But if you're not doing that, and it's continuing to happen, every cell in your body is doing what we've been talking about, but way better than we do it. These individual cells, they don't get sloppy, they don't take breaks, and they don't wish they didn't have to work so hard. They spend their entire existence doing nothing but their job. And their job is being conveyed to them by us. And this pranic current is flowing through us to each cell, and it's programmed with what that cell should do. And if it's got the image of disease or eating up the nerve sheaths or anything else, then that's exactly what every cell's going to do. So you got to find out where that program is and change it sometime soon.
program. What about mercury? Like I had to keep the amalgam taken out back in 1998. Yeah. And that was before they knew how to do it right, and a lot of chunks of the mercury was going down my throat.
Right.
Can my mind over matter undo that damage, do you think?
Not by force, but the life current in you can do it, no problem. Because solid things like mercury are a reflection of an energy signature. And that pranic life force that's going through you overrides anything below it. If you believe the mercury is going to kill you, it probably will.
So if it's just a reflection of energy, it can dissolve, is what you're saying?
Yeah, it can change form, and that's a form of what's called transmutation. There's a book called Biological Transmutation by Louis Kervran, who's a French scientist. And he did experiments because in regular chemistry, it's not supposed to be possible for one element to turn into another element. You know, like magnesium to turn into potassium or something like that. It just is impossible, except maybe by certain kinds of nuclear reactions. But what Kervran proved and demonstrated was that biological transmutation of one element into another happens constantly in nature. And he showed that, for example, in healing bones, putting in extra calcium didn't do anything for the rate of bone healing, but putting in extra silica had a totally different effect. The silica went into the body and appeared to just become calcium. And it became a calcium that the bones used immediately. And he had all these different experiments in nature where he actually proved that one element started out and another one was there after that. So, and in fact, there's these old stories that almost nobody believes anymore of alchemy. And the alchemy that is talked about, since people like to get money, is usually changing lead into gold. But the other, and that actually was done, because I know of instances where that's happened. And it's dangerous. You can be killed if you get involved in that, just like exposing free energy sources, because we're not supposed to know about it. But alchemy's real. It depends on the state of consciousness whether you can do it or not. It's not just a recipe book where you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and you get the gold. So the other thing that was used for producing gold was mercury. And both lead and mercury are in a certain point on the periodic table in relation to gold that kind of reflects that possibility. But this was done. And I know of one person specifically, no longer alive, I think he was in Salt Lake City area, that had an underground lab way far below his tract house that nobody knew existed. And he was actually producing gold out of mercury in that lab. So mercury is not just there to kill you unless you allow it to. But it doesn't matter what you say you believe. What matters is what you really believe. And it's not even at the level of intellect at all. It's deep, embedded in the emotional levels. And if you can use your self-observation to find where that level is, that you have this belief that mercury is going to make all the nerve sheaths get eaten up and you're going to end up paralyzed or worse, which is probably what you believe now. And you can let that go because you're the boss of those beliefs and not anybody else. Then that can be changed in any direction. But you have to find deeper and deeper levels of what you really believe and be brave enough to see it. And it's going to have an emotional content. And sometimes it's really powerful emotional content. And if you get even close to it, you're going to know it because it's just overwhelming. But if you're enough and just, as you get near it and you don't want to get closer because it's emotional, and you find yourself getting tense and defensive, you make a conscious decision to drop the defenses and totally relax and keep going and get to what you see. And when you get there and you have no resistance to it, whatever you tell it, it will have to do because you're the boss. That's just an exercise, because even though it's good to get rid of the future of having no nerve sheaths, which I would, say is not the best thing that you want, if you go through that and you're able to get into deep enough levels of your beliefs and give them the permission to change and let them know how you want them changed, once you've gone through that successfully in a little exercise like the nerve sheath thing, you start thinking, wow, what else can I do with this? And that's the weak point that our rulers know is their only area where they're really vulnerable. And that's why they're shutting us down as fast as they can.
Okay. Well, I know, like, with eating, when I detox, sometimes I go through what's called a Herxheimer reaction, or even even deeper, uncomfortable getting the toxin experience. But in my mind, I know it's something I have to go through that's actually a good thing, even though it's not pleasant while I'm doing it. And so, detoxing something, then I just tell myself, okay, this is going to pass. It's only temporary. I've got to get these toxins out. So you're thinking maybe on a deeper level I could do that with the mercury?
Yeah, sure. Everything works like that. It's just the impossible parts of it are what we believe is impossible.
Okay.
And we believe most things are impossible, no matter what you say to the contrary. So to open that up, you have to be willing to go into deeper and deeper levels to find out where those beliefs are hiding. They're not going to be in the intellect.
Okay, so they're maybe in my imprinting from when I was really young or something like that?
Yeah, it could be some other lifetime. You know how when they had alcohol prohibition going on, and government had armed agents running everywhere to try to arrest you or shoot you if you were moving alcohol. They had secret places because people were so determined to drink the alcohol, which wasn't brilliant. I mean, alcohol kills your cells. It's not the best idea to drink, but people were really determined. And so they had these places called speakeasies, where they had like a pizza shop in the front, and in the back was where they did the real alcohol business. So your intellect and all the thoughts that are running through it all day, that's the pizza place. Where the real business is going on is completely in the back room.
Okay. Well, I sure liked Dr. Cousins' impression. That was amazing.
Yeah, he's a pretty neat doctor. He's an example of a real honest one, that actually is motivated by trying to help everybody.
That was, just obvious, just wonderful. I appreciate what you're doing too, Richard, and as what's going to happen tomorrow with what was his name?
Alex Newman. Yeah. Yeah,
Alex. I was thinking, because you were saying, what could we do that's different monetarily wise? Well, didn't we to have a real free market? And I wanted to know from Alex, maybe you could ask him for me, what went wrong with that, and would it have worked if it wasn't interfered with?
Well, yeah, I can tell you right now that it all depends on the consciousness of the people in that country. So, and in fact, the founders of America said the same thing. They said, we're giving you a constitutional republic, not a democracy, because those are terrible. We're giving you a constitutional republic. And Franklin, when he was coming out of this meeting, in a famous scene where the lady asked him what kind of government they were giving everybody. He said, a constitutional republic, ma'am, if you can keep it. And the only way to keep it was to have the consciousness of the people be, primarily positive and open. And what happened in this country is not a problem with the system. It's a problem with the consciousness. Because what happened is that the people with the most malevolent wishes, the opposite of your well-wishing idea, they took all the positions of power in the top levels. And that's where all the problems are coming from now. Because that's their intent. What they believe in is destruction, and they're very clear about it. The people who are serving them below don't really understand it. They're mostly after money, but the ones at the top are not about money at all. They're after destruction. And that's where the chemtrails are coming from. It's where the GMOs are coming from. It's where the nuclear power is coming from. It's the suppression of the free energy sources and the use of the ridiculous source of petroleum for energy, which is totally not necessary and makes a big mess. And it's where the suppression of the economic systems that we need are coming from. So it's a consciousness problem. And as long as we have a system where the, top levels of the government are full with these people of malevolent intent, you can't fix it with a system, unfortunately.
So in other words, that system might have worked if people had been more pure of thought or loving?
Yeah. Well, the thing is that the money is just tokens for trade, right? That's all it was ever supposed to be in the beginning. It just turned into a tool of destruction because of the people controlling the system. But if you have, a better consciousness in society, then you have people wanting to be productive, and the wealth is a gift of nature and God through the earth. And when you have a corn plant and you put one seed in the ground and you get 1,000 back, that is not a trade. That's a free gift, and that's the beginning of the economic system. And then what you do with that corn when you harvest it, and you put creativity with it, you turn it into different things and you trade it, that's just allowing it to come into all these different forms. But the origin was from nature. That was the real increase. And then when you want to trade it in all different forms, you need a token, and a convenient one is gold or silver. And so that's where money comes in. But when you start seeing money as a way to steal, which is what the banking system does, by lending money they don't have at interest, then, they end up owning the government. So somehow, if people get back in touch with their normal state of consciousness, it's so powerful that it brings up ways for the negative one to be washed away. And that's really the reason that, I wanted to encourage people, get yourself in good shape on all levels, because you're the one that needs to contribute to that by what you do inside yourself. And there's no substitute for that in an economic system. But the natural economic system that comes out of that is more like what they would call free market capitalism, because it just means that you produce something out of your creativity and nature, you use money as a token for that to trade to somebody else, and it makes a free-flowing market of ideas and innovations and productivity, and there's vast prosperity. And the people that can't work because they're disabled or something like that, there's so much extra that there's private charity everywhere, and everybody's taken care of. It's like before they had government-run health care, the doctors, some of them would spend like 1/3 of their time for free treating the people that couldn't afford it. Nobody had to have insurance, where most of the money for health care is wasted paying for the government, and it was a free market. And the doctors that did the best service got really popular, and they were the most successful. That's just normal. It's not a system that has to be imposed. It's just the one that happens. So
okay.
we'll get back to that according to where our consciousness gets to.
Wow, that's positive thinking.
Things really are in the bigger picture 100% positive. We're guaranteed to be fine because it's not a philosophy. We really are permanent beings, and we're not limited. Our real identity is not physical. It's just that I personally would prefer if we don't have to go through as much unpleasant stuff that's coming up in the near future here. And the sooner we can get back to our normal consciousness, even one person, without telling anybody anything they're doing, can make a vast contribution. So everything you do during your day is your contribution to everything and to the whole world. It's not unimportant.
Okay, well that's encouraging. So even the chemtrails, maybe with a little bit of positive alchemy, could be turned into something good?
Absolutely. Everything physical is a reflection of an energy signature.
I like that. Reflection of an energy signature. So like that cascade you were talking about at the beginning, as it goes from energy more and more dense to physical, so with alchemy it's kind of going the other way maybe?
Yeah, alchemy is normal. It's happening in nature all the time. As Kervran pointed out, elements are changing from one to another, and it's nothing unusual. It's just it doesn't fit in our conventional system of limited chemistry right now. But it's happening all the time, and this gets into area that's really against our programming right now, that we're so limited. But in reality, there's levels and levels of what's going on. Physical things are all reflections of energy frequencies. But those frequencies are part of a big holographic projection that's coming out of our own consciousness. And it sounds like a paradox. And, I understand that, but the truth is that every single one of us is the only source of that projection. So if we get into the projector room and change the movie, we have complete power to heal absolutely anything, not only in our body, but in the entire outside environment.
So I could plug in a new DVD and get the mercury to dissolve and not worry about my nerves, and then maybe I'll be able to breathe without all the time.
Yeah, it'll be like a chain reaction leading to all kinds of positive things.
Okay, can you rent me a really good movie? No, just kidding.
Yeah, fortunately you have the movie already. You don't even need to rent it. You actually own all the movies, you can also see it like a radio receiver. That you're a transceiver. I mean, you're many things, but one of the things you are is a transceiver, and a transceiver is a combination of two words, a transmitter and a receiver. Okay, because you do both, and you do both all the time. And so the receiver part of that transceiver is tuning into a frequency right this minute. Anybody that's hearing us is tuned into something right now, and it's determining everything they're experiencing. If you have any idea what I'm talking about, this is vast power. And so if you're interested in a program that neutralizes mercury, why do you think there isn't a program like that? If you can imagine it, it exists somewhere in some form. Otherwise, it would never come into your awareness. So if you can accept the idea that there is a program like that existing now, it's not in production, it's already done. So the only thing that you really have to do, if you're on the level of tuning the dial of your receiver, is tune to that program and make sure you keep, like they say when they don't want you to go to another program, don't touch the dial. Stay tuned. And once you get beyond the immediate reaction of your mind that, oh, this is impossible, this can't possibly be true, otherwise the government would tell us or the scientists would know. Once you get past all that nonsense and you just drop it and you're brave enough to look at it, even if everybody in the solar system thinks you're crazy, it doesn't have anything to do with anything. It still exists. And if you play around with that dial, you'll notice as you turn it, just get used to the idea that you're receiving according to where you decide to turn the dial. And the thoughts that come into your mind are coming from the transmission that you're picking up. So if you're not directly in touch yet with the transmission, watch your thoughts because they're coming out of it. So if your thoughts are giving you a clue of what station you decided to tune to because you're used to it, and you're comfortable with it by familiarity, even if it doesn't feel good, it's all because of fear of things that are unfamiliar that we don't try changing the dial. So if you move the dial around to, why limit it? To think of the best program that you could imagine. And yeah, it dissolves mercury, but maybe it does other things too. And if you can imagine it, it's a real program. And if you tune and scan your dial to pick that up, just quietly inside yourself, but really paying attention, you'll know when you hit it because your thoughts will reflect it. And they won't be fake thoughts that you're putting in there to make yourself feel like you did it. They'll be spontaneous.
Cool.
And they'll have the emotional content will tell you that they're real.
So in my heart, I'll know that they're the truth.
Yeah. This is like relearning to feel on a very subtle, sensitive level. You know, we've been almost completely trained to analyze everything intellectually and thinking that we're really figuring it out like that. But then so-called science periodically figures that everything they believed was wrong. And they do that constantly. But if you get back in touch with paying attention to what's felt, and then at a quieter level under that, and under that, and under that, and exploring it, it's not really limited. So it's how you the feeling is like the feedback of when you turn the dial to the place that you want. I'm sorry it's all metaphor, but I don't know any better way to use language for it.
Yeah,
the frequency of the program you want is already there. It's coming right through your house right now. You're just not tuning into it because it's not the program you chose.
So feelings, I thought maybe weren't as dependable, but you're saying actually they are dependable because they're feedback, and we need to pay attention to the feedback in order to know where we're veering from where we want to go, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, the intellectual approach to science believes that feelings are threatening and untrustworthy because they have an infinite number of subtle variables involved. And in the current modern version of science, they like experiments that have one variable that you can change. And like, for example, they try to figure out if increasing the amount of time in the sun increases I don't know, the color of your skin, the darkness in the melanin in your skin or something like that. But there are maybe 1,000 or 1,000,000 variables that are actually involved. And maybe it has to do with your thought or with the time of day or with any one of a number of things that wasn't in the experiment. And then the results you get aren't valid. And in nature, you don't have single variable experiments going on ever. There's unlimited numbers of variables.
Is that a control thing, Richard, where that's why science is trying to say they have the answers is because it's a control trip? Is that what maybe?
Well, the really honest scientists do it because that's how they're trained.
Okay.
But the other levels that are coming through, well, at the top are using science intentionally for destruction. But there are forces way beyond the negative power structure, and they can be accessed anytime because those frequencies are always everywhere. They can't be blocked.
Neat. Thank you.
Yeah, it gets exciting. And as soon as we stop arguing and, to prove that everything's impossible and that everything's nonsense and that, the conventional line of thought is the only valid one and all these things that we have to, defend in order to prevent unknowns from threatening our whole view of reality. That fear is based on the belief somewhere in our emotional makeup that the reality may be bad.
Mm.
And that's why everybody's so afraid to find out.
The fear of the unknown is because it might change something when we really might do better by changing something?
No, yeah, it really will be better by finding out more and more of what's really going on, but the belief is that because reality might ultimately be something really terrifying and bad, that you got to stay with what you're familiar with even if it's uncomfortable.
So that's the opposite of truth.
Yeah, the reality is not bad, and it doesn't require a name. In fact, the name is limiting. The real experience of the reality is something, the people who have gone into it pretty far have all reported that it's this ecstatic condition that is not like a drug high where you have to, damage and limit your mind in order to feel temporarily good. It's the opposite, where you feel good because you're getting clearer and clearer, and this natural energy that supports everything everywhere is just flowing through you without the resistance. And it's the best feeling that you can imagine. And instead of negative side effects that all the drugs have, it's got positive side effects, and everything just keeps getting better. So I highly, encourage exploring and investigating it without any fear. And the fear of anything is totally useless. All these religious authorities that taught fear of God, it was so that you'd never question what they told you. Because there's always this thing over you that even though God loves you so much, He'll send you to hell forever for your own good. And there's something wrong with that picture. Yeah. So the reality, whether you call it God or nature or spirit or, the source or whatever, is not something bad, but I don't want anybody to take my word for that. Just be brave and explore in yourself, because that takes the highest courage. If you don't have labels for the moment, you're not going to be lost.
So it doesn't have to have a name, but wow, so I have a lot of work to do letting go of whatever, all those things that keep popping up in my homework.
Yeah, you're really devoted to the belief that the mercury is going to destroy your nervous system, and it wouldn't be very good if you allow it to happen. No.
So you're saying I can control, well, control's not really, control has good and bad connotations, but I can is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's not going to help you unless you get to the real level of the belief. And, of course, the physical detox stuff is still really good. But it's way, way better if you can also stop supporting the negative condition with what you believe.
Okay. It's a frequency thing, in other words.
Yeah, you can see everything that way. Every thought's got its own frequency, and that's how it, affects things here. The only reason our thought is not much more powerful is because it's chaotic. And we're thinking opposite things back and forth all the time, and so we don't see the effect, but the effect is there.
Okay. Personal alchemy is a new next step.
Yeah, you're doing it already. You're just not doing it really in the way that you'd like to do it.
Okay.
Thoughts have chemical effects in your blood instantaneously, and that is a form of alchemy. But most people are using it to create acid and all kinds of garbage in their blood.
So even if if I'm somebody that ends up with 4th stage cancer and I want to change my mind at the last second of the last minute, I can still do that.
If you really do it, you can't just tell yourself an affirmation, okay, I'm changing it now. It's not going to do anything. You have to access the level that it's really operating from. And then it would help, of course, if you do physical things that are helpful. Okay. But the most powerful is the belief system. Everybody's devoted to some belief system, and almost nobody knows what their beliefs actually are.
Okay, so I got to get behind my own curtain and find out.
Yeah, just make the unconscious conscious, like they've talked about for thousands of years. You just can't do it on the intellectual level.
So Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing all that stuff. It's all exciting. And I know that it applies personally to every single person listening to this. So it's completely relevant. And if they're brave enough to see it, they can they can join you in that same effort to become aware, because what's hiding behind that is worth finding. It changes your whole life.
Okay.
So
I want to get rid of the mercury for sure. So, and other things.
Yeah. And just realize that it can go out, even if it doesn't transmute into something else. It can get out of your body. Your body is quite capable of throwing it out.
Neat.
And every cell in your body is conscious, and they're all looking at you all the time, 24 hours a day. And they're taking their orders from you. And that's why people who get depressed, sometimes their body just gives up and they die. Because the cells believe you. They have absolute belief in you. It's like they're God. And if you're telling them and you're feeling that life is not worth it, they believe you and begin to die. And if you're telling them that mercury is in your body forever, and it's going to destroy all your nerve sheaths, and you can picture it happening, which you do, and then, all these terrible things, or you're going to be paralyzed and all this stuff, they're going to make sure that they make that happen because they believe in you 100%. And you're using it now. So you just need to use it a little bit different.
Okay. Wow. That's very enlightening.
People don't realize how much power that they have. It's overwhelming.
And you're saying we don't have to even worry about not being able to overcome our programming, that if we have an intent to do that, it's automatically going to happen?
If you do it at a deep enough level, yeah. The whole trick is getting conscious of a deep enough level of it. If you mistake the intellectual reflection for the original program, it's not going to do much of anything. Even if you tell yourself it's all fine. You have to actually get to the level where you're aware of, you see where it's coming from. And you go in there and you give it permission to fall out.
Okay. I have a new homework assignment.
Yeah, you can do that. You have unlimited ability. Right. You just have to start becoming aware of how much you believe is impossible. And watch yourself during the day, how that's operating.
Yeah, I have a lot of that, I noticed. And even that whole money system thing, I get really pressed about not being able to change any of that. But
yes, and that's cementing the belief in place.
Okay.
It's really hard when you see the outside reflection of what your negative beliefs are, because your mind says that's reality. Mm-hmm. And you have to get into the level where the feeling's coming from and allow that to change before you see any confirmation on the outside. That's why almost no one does that, because they're so focused on the outside, it feels impossible. But it's only because they believe it's impossible. And I'm talking to myself, not just everybody else. Because I'm doing the same homework that you are.
Well, we just buy into something that's not true, I guess you might say.
Yeah, we've constructed our whole life out of that, basically.
False concept.
And you can't force it to change. You have to actually get to where it can be changed.
Okay. All right.
So,
well, I've been enjoying I appreciated the yoga stuff. I didn't know anything about stretching and stuff. I want to get one of those tubey things. I got a lot on my plate too, but thank you.
Yeah, you do. And if you can't do any other kind of exercise, just take a walk or something.
I used to walk a lot more than I have been lately. I just feel really hemmed in lately for some reason, so I have to probably explore to figure that one.
Yeah, tune into the frequency where you don't feel like that.
Okay.
See what happens.
Neat. Thanks.
Okay, so have a good week and let us know what happens.
All right. Thanks.
Okay. Talk to you later.
Okay.
Okay. So this is again question whether we're done or there's anyone else that wants to say anything. I think I told you the summary things already that I wanted to remind you of. Alex will be on tomorrow night, 6 o'clock Pacific, 9 o'clock Eastern. Video subscription service, if you want that. It's going to get more and more personal and I hope interesting. And that's coming out almost every day now. And that's at lostartsradio.com at the video subscribers tab. Doug's site, diamonddiscaudio.com. And let's see, I'm getting... Doug is reminding me that he's done an incredible job redesigning the radio website. It's beautiful. And it's more in a video format. People are in so much of a hurry lately that they don't have time to read a lot of stuff, but usually people like watching videos if they're interesting because you can pick up a huge amount of impression and information that way in a very short time. So what we're doing is we're changing the lostartsradio.com website almost entirely to video format. There's still articles on there if you want to find those and read them, and I'm adding to those when I find ones I want to share with you, or if there's something I need to write that I want to share. But more what I'm wanting to share, I'm doing verbally or on video, and videos from all kinds of other people are being put on the lostartsradio.com website. Educational ones, things relating to relevant current events out in the world, stuff like that. Sometimes excerpts from other shows that are important, putting those up there. So I'd recommend that you go there. Also, we're trying to make it more convenient to listen to the archives of the show, especially recent ones, but actually all the ones are directly accessible through lostartsradio.com. Even on the front page, you can find the latest show there. It's embedded. You don't even have to use a link. It makes it super convenient and quick. You can find the latest in the Saturday show and the Sunday night show. And Alex's previous show, for example, from the Paris Climate Conference is accessible in there at the bottom where it says View All Archives. It's just, I think it's a lot better, but let me know what you think. You can always email me with impressions or questions or suggestions or anything on the shows or the video subscription service or anything at richard@lostartsradio.com. And I think Doug has done an incredible job with that site. Don't be, I encourage everybody to stay up to date with what's going on in the outside world. I continue to think that the best overall news service is Infowars.com on the written part or PrisonPlanet.tv on the video part, which is worth the $6 a month it costs. But I would differ from what Alex sometimes puts out there because I'm suggesting your greatest power is not in getting upset, in getting angry, in getting fearful. In fact, I spent a lot of time today just encouraging you to find out where these emotions are coming from in you and letting them go. Because if you're brave enough to not have fear, anger, frustration, and realize those are all voluntary, what you're going to find behind them is totally life-transforming. It means you have to stay on that exploration. It doesn't necessarily happen overnight unless you did all the work in some long-forgotten time, which most of us didn't. We did the opposite, running in all kinds of crazy directions. But if you start looking inside yourself and learning to tune the dial of your receiver system to the frequency that you want to pick up, you're going to lose all interest in criticizing anybody else. People are going to start to like interacting with you when they found it contentious before. You're going to have harmony in your life. You're going to see new ways to get through situations that looked impossible. And it's just a matter of getting to the internal point where you can change the frequency of what program that you're picking up. And to start that, you've got to become aware of the program that you're attuned to now. And your thoughts are a clue to what program it is. If you get into a more positive program, you don't have any temptation of any kind of drug. You're in relaxed control of what you do. Nothing can, just make you try to get toward it and eat things you don't want to eat or anything like that. The other thing that I forgot to mention that Doug just brought up is that there's a free newsletter available on lostartsradio.com. And you have to look around on the front page and you'll find out where to sign up for it. It's totally no cost, free. And what it does is I'm trying to get that out every week now in time to tell you about things about the upcoming show that I want to share with you and anything else developing. It's definitely a pretty good deal for free. And I would encourage everybody to sign up for that if you can when you get a chance. So other than that, I hope you have a great week. If you feel like it, practice the things of tuning that we talked about, and then let us know anytime, and especially next Saturday or whenever you get a chance by email, how it goes for you. And I greatly appreciate your being with us. We'll continue this discussion next week. Have a good time practicing. I'll talk to you then.